Here's a number that should stop you cold. Roughly 70% of the American men who relocate to Sosua, Dominican Republic, are gone within 18 months. Not moved on to better cities, gone. Back to Tampa, back to Phoenix, back to whatever they were running from. Meanwhile, the guys who moved to Medellín at roughly the same time are still there on year 3, year 4, some of them indefinitely. Same demographic, same general budget, same general idea about what they wanted from Latin America. Wildly different outcomes. That gap, that chasm between what those two cities actually deliver versus what the YouTube ecosystem will have you believe, is exactly what this video is about. I'm Alex. I've lived in 4 Latin American cities over the last 9 years. By the end of this video, you will know which of these 2 cities actually matches your lifestyle goals, your infrastructure needs, and your long-term plan. And more importantly, you'll understand why they attract completely different kinds of men. Before we dive in, please subscribe so you don't miss future city breakdowns. I cover one comparison or deep dive every few videos, and every one of them is built on time actually living in these places, not a 2-week visit. Let's get into it. The comparison between Sosua and Medellín sounds like it shouldn't even be a fair fight. Medellín is a proper metropolis. 2.5 million people in the city, another million in the surrounding metro, a world-class transit system, a university ecosystem, a growing tech sector, internationally recognized urban transformation. Sosua is a beach town on the northern coast of the Dominican Republic with a permanent population, somewhere around 30,000 people, a main drag of bars and restaurants, and a reputation that frankly makes certain things easy and other things nearly impossible. And yet men put these 2 cities side by side constantly. They're both warm weather, Spanish-speaking destinations. Both are significantly cheaper than the US. Both have large expat populations of American and European men. Both show up obsessively in relocation forums and Facebook groups. So the comparison matters. Even if the cities themselves are operating in completely different weight classes. What I want to do here is cut through the hype on both sides, because there is hype on both sides, and give you the actual decision framework, not which city is better in the abstract. Which city is better for you, based on what you're actually trying to build. Let's start with cost of living, because it's the first thing everyone asks and the area where the most mythology exists on both sides. Medellín has a reputation still in 2026 as a cheap city. And in some ways it still is, but the gap between Medellín and a mid-tier American city has narrowed considerably compared to what it was 5 or 6 years ago. El Poblado, which is still where most first-time expats land, has been priced upward by years of demand from Americans, Europeans, and digital nomads. A decent 1-bedroom in Poblado or the Provenza micro-neighborhood is going to run you $1,000 to $400 per month now. A proper 2-bedroom, the kind you'd actually want to live in for a year or more, not a furnished closet, is $200 to $800, depending on the building and the finishes. If you shift neighborhoods, and I'd argue most men who stay in Medellín long-term end up doing exactly this, the numbers change. Laurels, which is a residential neighborhood west of the river, more Colombian than expat, good infrastructure, genuinely pleasant streets. A 2-bedroom there runs $800 to $2,200. Envigado, just south of Poblado and technically a separate municipality, is a level calmer, slightly cheaper, and has developed a small but real expat community of its own. I've seen solid 2-bedrooms in Envigado in the $900 to $2,400 range. Groceries in Medellín, if you shop at Carula or Éxito and cook most of your meals, run about $300 to $400 a month for one person eating reasonably well. Dining out, you're looking at $12 to $25 for a good lunch or dinner at a real restaurant. Not a tourist trap, not a hole in the wall, something in between. Dinner for 2 at a quality spot in Provenza or Laureles is $40 to $70 with drinks. Healthcare we'll get to separately. The metro is less than $1 a ride. Ubers are cheap. A solid private health insurance plan from a Colombian insurer runs $80 to $150 per month for a healthy man in his 40s. All in, rent, food, transport, insurance, utilities, a reasonable social life. You can live well in Medellín on $2,200 to $2,800 per month. If you're in Poblado and eating out constantly, that number climbs toward $300 to $500. If you're in Laureles or Envigado and living more like a resident than a tourist, you can do it for $800 and feel like you're not slumming it. Now Sosua. Here's where the mythology gets aggressive in the other direction. The online forums will tell you Sosua is absurdly cheap. that you can live like a king for $100 a month. That number is real, but what it buys you is not what you're picturing. Sosua's rental market is distorted because the town is small, because there's limited quality inventory, and because a certain subset of the expat market there isn't particularly selective. You can find rooms or basic apartments for $400 to $600 a month. But anything that's clean, modern, has reliable air conditioning, essential in a Caribbean coastal town, and is in a neighborhood where you'll feel comfortable walking around at night is going to run you $800 to $1,400. For a one-bedroom, the two-bedroom inventory at quality level is limited and often priced at $200 to $1,800 as well. Imported goods in the DR are expensive. Anything that didn't come from a Dominican farm, wine, cheese, decent cuts of meat, electronics, car parts, costs more than you'd expect for a developing Caribbean economy, because import duties are brutal. If you eat local food, Dominican food, which is good and cheap, your grocery bill stays manageable. If you want to cook and eat the way you eat in the U.S., you're going to pay close to U.S. prices for certain items. Healthcare in Sosua is the real hidden cost. A minor issue? There are clinics. A serious issue? You are looking at traveling to Santiago, a 45-minute drive, or to Santo Domingo, 2.5 hours by road. Private insurance in the DR that covers you at a decent private hospital runs $150 to $250 per month. And the quality ceiling of that coverage is still lower than what $120 per month buys you at Clínica del Campestre in Medellín or Clínica Sura. The honest all-in number for Sosua, living at a quality level you won't regret, is $2,000 to $3,000 per month. Not dramatically cheaper than Medellín, and without Medellín's infrastructure supporting that spend. The cost advantage of Sosua over Medellín is real but smaller than advertised, and the quality ceiling at a given budget is lower. Infrastructure is where these two cities diverge most sharply, and it's the dimension that almost nobody covers honestly in Sosua content. Medellín has a metro system that actually works. Line A and Line B cable cars into the hillside comunas, an integrated bus rapid transit system called the Metroplus. It's not Zurich, but it is genuinely functional urban transit that lets you live without a car. Internet in Medellín, in a modern building in Poblado, Laureles, or Envigado, is excellent. Fiber connections of 200 to 500 megabits are standard. I've had remote calls from Medellín apartments with zero issues for months at a stretch. Coworking spaces are abundant. Selena, Atomic, and a dozen independent spots running $150 to $250 per month for a hot desk membership. Banking in Colombia has improved substantially. If you arrive on a tourist visa, which gives you 90 days renewable, you can open an account at Bancolombia or Davivienda within your first few months if you have the right documentation. The process is annoying, but it is doable. Receiving USD wire transfers from U.S. clients, converting to pesos, operating as a functional economic participant in Colombia, it works. Visa structure for Colombia. You enter on a 90-day tourist stamp, extendable once for another 90 days. After that, you're looking at a digital nomad visa, the Nomada Digital Visa, which requires proving $684 per month in income. Essentially, anyone reading the stelz will qualify, and gives you 2 years. Or the Rentista Visa if your income is pension or passive. The Colombian visa infrastructure for remote workers is genuinely one of the better designed frameworks in Latin America right now. Now the Dominican Republic, Sosua specifically. Internet in Sosua is the first thing that surprises remote workers. It is inconsistent. Not always bad. There are apartments with solid fiber connections, particularly newer builds, but the reliability is not at Medellín's level. Power outages are a real operational issue in the northern DR. Many buildings run on generator backup, which handles the outage but not always the noise. If you are doing serious remote work with synchronous calls, video conferences, deadline-sensitive deliverables, you need to test your specific apartment's connection before committing to a lease. This is not a deal breaker for everyone, but it is a factor that doesn't come up in the move to Sosua content. Transport in Sosua. You need a motorbike or a car, or you're depending on motoconchos, motorcycle taxis, which are cheap but limited in range and zero fun in the rain. There is no transit system in any meaningful sense. The roads between Sosua and Puerto Plata, between Sosua and Cabaret, are fine. The roads elsewhere in the region range from acceptable to poor depending on when it last rained. Dominican Republic visa structure is actually one of the most permissive in the region for Americans. You can enter on a tourist card, paid at the airport, and stay for 30 days, extensible. They don't enforce overstay with anything resembling Colombian or Mexican rigor. A lot of expats in Sosua exist in a semi-legal perpetual tourist status for years. If you want formal residency, the rent-to-resident category requires proving $500 per month in passive income and is a legitimate multi-year path. But the banking situation in the DR for foreign residents is genuinely difficult. Opening a Dominican bank account as a foreigner takes months, requires substantial documentation, and the international wire infrastructure is weaker than Colombia's. If your income depends on reliable infrastructure, Medellín is not even close to Sosua on this dimension. I want to know, which city are you actually considering? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone and it helps me decide what to cover next. Now we get to lifestyle and cultural feel, which is where these cities separate most fundamentally, and where you need to be the most honest with yourself. Medellín is a city, a real functioning complex Latin American city. It has neighborhoods with distinct characters. El Poblado is glossy, restaurant dense, expat heavy, slightly sanitized for consumption. Laurels is where upper-middle-class Colombians actually live, calmer, more residential, excellent food. Envigado feels like a small city annexed to Medellín's southern edge, relaxed, genuinely livable. Sabaneta is further south, almost suburban but with a real local texture. You can build a life here that has depth, a primary doctor, a neighborhood coffee shop where they know your order, a gym, a co-working community, actual Colombian friendships over time. The cultural pace in Medellín is unhurried but not sleepy. This is a city that takes food seriously, that has a real cultural calendar, concerts, festivals, an international book fair, a flower festival in August that turns the entire city into something worth seeing. It's a city where you can disappear into normal life and forget, most days, that you're an expat. That's the rare thing. Most expat cities don't give you that option. The climate in Medellín is the other factor that doesn't get discussed enough. It's genuinely exceptional. The city sits at around 500 Hz elevation, which gives it an eternal spring. Highs in the low 80s Fahrenheit, lows in the upper 60s year-round, no humidity death, no rainy season that shuts everything down. You can walk comfortably. You can eat outside. You don't need air conditioning unless you're particularly sensitive to heat. For a man thinking about where he wants to live for 5 or 10 years, not just vacation, climate matters more than most YouTube content acknowledges. Sosua's lifestyle is fundamentally different in character, not just in scale. Sosua is a beach town with a particular history and a particular social ecosystem that has built up around that history. The town's main strip, Calle Pedro Clisante and the streets immediately around it, is bars, restaurants, some tourist shops, and a social scene that operates primarily at night. During the day, the town is relatively quiet. The beach is genuinely beautiful. Playa Sosua is a protected cove with calm water, clear visibility, coral nearby. Cabaret, 10 minutes east, is a world-class kite and windsurfing destination with a more active daytime energy. The expat community in Sosua is real and established. There are men who have been there 10, 15, 20 years. There are weekly expat meetups, Facebook groups, social structures. If you are the kind of person who thrives in a small-town social ecosystem where everyone knows everyone, Sosua actually delivers that. It's a specific kind of community, tight, sometimes insular, heavy on retirees and semi-retirees, but it is a community. What Sosua doesn't have is depth of city culture. There's no theater district, no international food scene to speak of, no co-working ecosystem, no art galleries worth mentioning. The DR has a genuine culture, merengue, bachata, the specific warmth of Dominican social life, but accessing it in Sosua means reaching past the expat bubble to connect with Dominican families and social networks, and that takes real effort and real Spanish. The weather in Sosua is Caribbean, hot and humid year-round with highs in the upper 80s to low 90s, humidity that makes it feel warmer, and a rainy season from May through October that doesn't shut the town down but does change its texture. If you love the beach and heat is your natural habitat, this is fine. If you're someone who wilts in humidity, 6 months of Sosua will feel like a slow-motion misery you didn't see coming. Let's talk about the kind of man who actually thrives in each city, because this is the most important and least discussed dimension. The man who does well in Medellín long-term is generally someone who arrived with a real reason to be there beyond the lifestyle appeal. He has a work structure, remote income, a business, consulting that gives his days shape. He learned Spanish, not because he has to, but because the city rewards him for it exponentially. He picks a neighborhood and goes deep instead of drifting between tourist zones. He's interested in urban life, in good food, in a social world that isn't constructed entirely around other expats. He's willing to put in the months it takes for the city to open up to him. The man who struggles in Medellín is usually someone who relocated primarily for the lifestyle buzz, who spent his first 2 months in Poblado in a state of stimulation, and then hit month 4 and realized that if you're not building something, if your days have no structure, Medellín doesn't provide the structure for you. It's a city that amplifies what you bring to it. If you bring ambition and curiosity, it amplifies those. If you bring avoidance, it amplifies that too. The man who does well in Sosua long-term is a different profile. He is typically older. 50s and 60s make up a significant portion of the long-term Sosua's expat community. He is often retired or has passive income that doesn't require serious infrastructure. He genuinely loves beach life as a daily operating mode, not as a vacation treat. He is comfortable in a small-town social ecosystem and not looking for the stimulation of a real city. He has a defined daily routine that the beach, the water, the expat community, and the Dominican lifestyle can support. The man who burns out of Sosua, and this is the 70% number I opened with, is the guy who arrived thinking it was a low-cost vacation that would last forever, and discovered somewhere around month 6 that there's a ceiling on what the town delivers, and that ceiling comes fast. He wants more culture, more professional stimulation, more variety. And Sosua can't give him more. The town is what it is. There's also an honest conversation that has to happen here about Sosua's reputation. The town has a well-documented sex tourism history, and while the nature of that scene has shifted somewhat over the years, it is still a material part of the social landscape. If you are someone who finds that environment, the street-level hustle, the transactional social dynamics, the particular expat culture that has grown up around all of that, if you find that environment neutral or positive, Sosua will feel comfortable to you. If you find it uncomfortable, or if you're trying to build something that doesn't involve that texture, you will feel it every day. This is not a judgment. It is a description that you deserve to have before you sign a lease. Medellín has its own version of this dynamic. El Poblado's party streets are not exempt from similar textures. But the city is large enough and complex enough that you can build a life that never touches it if you choose your neighborhood and your social world intentionally. In Sosua, the town is small enough that you cannot fully separate yourself from whatever the current character of that main strip is. The trade-offs now, and this is where I want to be direct with you. What you give up in Medellín. Relative to Sosua, you give up the beach. Medellín has no beach. The nearest coast, Cartagena, Santa Marta, is a flight away or a long drive. If your vision of daily life in Latin America centers on waking up, walking 10 minutes, and swimming in warm ocean water, Medellín cannot give you that. For some people, this is acceptable. For some people, it is a deal breaker they discover too late. Know which one you are before you sign a Colombian lease. You also give up simplicity. Medellín is a complex city. The visa structure has layers. The banking process is bureaucratic. The social navigation requires more active investment. There is more to learn, more to manage, more to fail at in the early months. Some men find this energizing. Some find it exhausting. What you give up in Sosua, everything infrastructure related, and we've covered this. But the deeper thing you give up is the possibility of depth. Depth of culture, depth of professional community, depth of city life. Sosua is the city for a man who has already built his thing and wants to live simply near warm water. It is not the city for building. You also give up the kind of social world that exists in a real city. The friendships you make in Sosua will be primarily with other expats, primarily with men in retirement mode. If you're 38 and building a robust business and you want to be around ambitious people, you will not find your tribe in Sosua at the density you need. And then there's the safety dimension, which I want to address briefly and honestly. Medellín has a violent history and a current reality that includes genuine crime in certain areas. The tourist zones and the established residential neighborhoods are not the war zones the 1990s reputation suggests, but you are not in Switzerland. Muggings happen. Scopolamine incidents, the drug used to incapacitate people, are a real vector and have affected expats in Poblado specifically. You manage this through neighborhood selection, through awareness, through not walking home alone drunk at 3 a.m. Most people who live there for years do so without incident. But the risk is real and managing it requires engagement. The Dominican Republic has its own security considerations. Sosua specifically has a level of street-level hustle, persistent vendors, occasional petty theft, the particular aggressive energy that develops in any town built heavily around tourism and transaction that requires a certain adjustment. Violent crime directed at tourists in Sosua is not high statistically, but the low-grade friction of the street environment is constant in a way that some adapt to quickly and others find grinding over months. Here's the verdict, and I'm going to give it to you straight. If you are under 50, have active remote income, want to build something, a business, a social world, a professional identity in Latin America, want infrastructure that supports serious work, want a city complex enough to hold your interest for 3 to 5 years, and you can handle the learning curve, Medellín is not even close. Sosua cannot compete on those dimensions. Medellín is a real city with real infrastructure, a real expat community that includes professionals and entrepreneurs alongside the retirees, and a quality of daily life that holds up under long-term scrutiny. If you are over 55, have passive or retirement income, have genuinely good mental health and a structured daily life you'll bring with you, rather than hoping the city provides, love beach and warm water as a non-negotiable daily element, and are specifically looking for a simple, low-friction life near the Caribbean, Sosua is a legitimate option. Not for everyone, not for men who need the stimulation of city life, but for that specific profile it is real and it works. The mistake that YouTube makes constantly, and the forums, and the Facebook groups, is presenting these two cities as competitors for the same man. They are not. They serve different profiles, different life stages, different definitions of what a good daily life looks like. The man who should be in Sosua would be unhappy in Medellín's complexity. The man who should be in Medellín would be bored and restless in Sosua inside of a year. The question is not which city is better. The question is which city matches the life you are actually trying to build, not the life you're imagining from a 2-week visit, and not the life someone's YouTube channel is selling you. Be brutally honest about whether you are in settler mode or in retreat mode. That single distinction will tell you more about this decision than any comparison video, including this one. Here's the meta pattern I want to leave you with. Both of these cities have large expat communities, which means both of them have already processed thousands of men through their ecosystem. The men who stayed and built good lives in each place share one characteristic. They came knowing what they needed and they found a city that could deliver it. The men who left, sometimes broke, sometimes demoralized, sometimes just confused about how the dream went sideways, almost universally made the same mistake. They chose a city based on how it looked from the outside, from a video, from a forum thread, from the vibe of a week-long trip, without doing the honest internal audit of what they actually need from a place to live in it well. The truth about Latin American relocation that nobody on YouTube will tell you is this: the city doesn't make the life. The life you build makes the city worth living in. If you arrive with structure, with purpose, with a realistic budget, and with the right city for your actual needs, it works, and it works well. If you arrive hoping the city will provide those things, no city will save you. Not Medellín, not Sosua, not anywhere. Building these breakdowns takes real time. If this was useful, please support the channel by subscribing. I cover a different city every few videos. See you in the next one.